Well, good morning, everybody. Father John Wilson here. It's Tuesday, May 5th. And, when we last left off, our friend Mary Teresa Tallon, then known as Sister John Berchmans, she was in San Francisco teaching and really having a great success in her apostolic labors, but also suffering for her desire for deeper interior recollection and communion with our Lord. Then in April 1904, a new trial, a new kind of suffering comes her way. This is when there's a really severe outbreak of diphtheria, the disease diphtheria in San Francisco. And something like 30 kids from her school get sick. And she herself, her health is already not that great because, largely because of, the burden of all the work she's been doing. And actually her classroom is in like this damp, moldy, kind of polluted basement. So not great to begin with, but then she does what, her heart leads her to do, which is visit her sick students. And it's on one of these visits that she contracts a bad case of diphtheria. And she spends the next, 6 months or so in San Francisco, just like in and out of bed, you know, you know, resting, trying to recuperate, trying to get back to work, and then falling back into illness again. She actually tries to start teaching in the new school year in actually they started in July back then, but after a few days she just collapses from weakness. So what her community does is they send her back to Indiana, back to the mother house where there's a big infirmary for sick sisters, and she's there for another 6 months or so. And we see some beautiful aspects of her time at that, her life at that time. Certainly her cheerfulness as a patient, even trying to cheer up and to, share, pious, encouraging thoughts with the sisters who are coming to visit her. After a while, she receives permission to begin. It's interesting what she calls an apostolate of letter writing, and that's really just in spending a few hours a day responding to the correspondence she's been given, like just sitting up in bed, writing letters to families back in San Francisco mostly. And she even, as she gets better and better, she even helps some of the other infirm sisters write their letters. And this is also a time of grace for her because, we've seen her desire for contemplation, her desire for time for spiritual reading. And she says, in God's grace, I can be a contemplative now. I'm stuck in bed. What else am I going to do? And this illness is also how, in God's providence, she came to New York City, where his very special call for her to found the Parish Visitors of Mary Immaculate, where she encounters that. Because, when she gets better, it's time for a new assignment. So we see God working powerfully in her life, even in this time of illness. And now I'd actually like to jump ahead a little bit. I'd like to jump ahead to 1918, because as you can imagine, when I've started going through her papers, one of the things that I had an interest in is, well, okay, how did she respond? What was her life like around the time of the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918, 1919? The Spanish flu is really the most recent, historical parallel we have to what we're facing right now with the coronavirus. So 1918, she is at this time she's teaching at a school in Illinois, and this is during her what she calls her exile years. She's been removed from New York City after 8 years of really fruitful labor there. But this is a time where she's really actively trying to get permission to start this new community. And she's engaging in extensive correspondence with priests and bishops back in New York, with the young women she met back in New York, who are already starting to undertake some of the work that she's inspired them to do. So we've got a lot of documents from her from this period, and so I'm looking through them, and I want to discover, like, okay, what great wisdom, spiritual insight does she have for us to face the time that we're going through. And at first I was a little bit disappointed, because her letters are really quite matter of fact. And I want to read just a short excerpt from one of them. This is from October 7th, 1918. Writing to one of the young women she was gathering around her back in New York. She says, "There was no school here last week, for the Board of Health ordered it closed, also because of influenza. The priest's household were all down, including the pastor. The sisters, too, had a bad visitation, but I have escaped so far. Most of my time last week was spent as a nurse, but I managed to get some work done on my treasure notes every day." She's referring to her notes and kind of articulating her vision for the new community. Then she goes on, "As the sisters are better now, I hope to do some real work this week. But oh, the loss of daily communion. It is terrible, even though God's grace is abundantly making up. How good He is. This county is the worst affected of all the country. Nearly all the parish is ill." And then she just goes on to talk about other stuff that's going on in her life at the time. And right, so this is very matter of fact stuff. But we notice a few things, right? We see her suffering, the lack of Holy Communion. The priest is sick, and there's no way to get another priest there. So she's not able to go to Mass for a while. But also trusting in God and testifying that His grace has made up for that lack. We see her, caring for her sick sisters, spending most of her time as a nurse while they're sick. And although it's interesting, she contrasts that to her quote unquote real work in letter writing and getting this community started. I mean, it's not like she devalues the work of caring for the sick, but it's just sort of, yeah, of course, this is what I'm doing. The sisters are sick. I'm healthy. I'm going to take care of them. And she actually winds up being able to get a lot of that work done, as she predicted, because the school wound up being closed for about 5 to 6 weeks during that time. We're starting to see that. I'm sure you're seeing the parallels to our time too. And so we have some interesting details, no real like gem of spiritual wisdom. But in reading this, I actually found myself quite encouraged, and encouraged even just to read about this happening 100 years ago, because it puts our time in perspective, and it makes me realize, okay, well, what we're going through right now is temporary. God will get us through it. And it's a reminder that, our experience of time is not God's. He is eternal. A lot of us have been suffering, like she did, a lack of Holy Communion. But it's actually an invitation to invite on to reflect on the nature of the Mass, right? The Mass itself is God bends the laws of time and space by making the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross, which happened 2,000 years ago, half a world away, making that present, right here, right now. And so if He can do that, He can, like she testified, He can keep flooding our souls with His grace. He is that good. He is that powerful. And we also see in her writings at this time that patience, that day to day confidence that the work of God continues. And we can even see what God has been using that time for. Um, I think it's exactly what He's using this time in our lives for sanctifying souls, for preparing the fruitful apostolic labors that will come in the after we're able to come back together. God is laying the groundwork. He's laying the groundwork for a lot of good stuff. We need to trust in that. We need to pray for that, and we need to invite Him into our souls in this time. That the good work He wants to do will bear great fruit in the future. God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.